Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigeland Network show. My name is Emma Vigeland, and folks, you know what to do. Subscribe, youtube.com/ESVN show. Put on push notifications. Rate us 5 stars, and say hello to Bradley Alsop, who is with me today, as he is almost every day if he's not on his honeymoon.
That's right.
That's right.
If I'm not off on my own PSYOP.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that in a bit because the commentary around Taylor Swift dating Travis Kelce has taken quite the turn in right-wing media. But hello,
all very
Bradley.
normal, very cool,
Very normal.
very palatable for the median voter.
Exactly. These are the kinds of things that get people to the polls.
Kitchen table issues.
Right.
The economy, immigration, a PSYOP couple, celebrity couple.
Right. What is Taylor Swift's
Just call me James Carville.
version of Pokemon go to the polls?
It's that Hillary Clinton tweet about Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig.
Oh, hashtag Taylor Barbie.
Hashtag Taylor is Kenough.
Yeah. Hashtag leave a blank space when voting for Trump.
Take Honda forever.
God, culture is just
No,
at a
we're in
huge low
hell
point.
for the most part.
It died. It died with after Britney Spears came out with that Blackout album. There's like no longer any collective pop culture.
It's the end of history.
It is. So I guess that's just like I was away for a work trip that turned into like a day and a half with family at the end. So I'm sorry that we weren't able to get you the Monday show. I'll give my thoughts really quickly on the conference championship games. I felt more angry at the game plan decisions by the losing teams than I expected to. I guess I didn't realize how much I was rooting for the Ravens and the Lions until, it kind of began to sink in what was happening. Look, I love Odell Beckham Jr., you know that. And I love Lamar Jackson, you know that. But as that game progressed and you saw the Chiefs take over, I'm not a Chiefs hater. Like, I love witnessing greatness when we see it. And for me, for my money, I think Patrick Mahomes is on track to be the greatest football player in the history of the sport. Like, with quarterback being the most intensive position, the one with the most on your plate, like, at least on an offense, from the offensive perspective, that's how I feel. And Mahomes has the insane intensity that Brady had and the smarts that Brady had and the physical talent of, I would say Aaron Rodgers, but he's an even better, thicker guy than Aaron Rodgers. He's just got everything. He's got the smarts. He's got he's got the sixth sense about the field. And they didn't even do that much on offense, but they did enough. And Mahomes adjusted his game in the second half to be more conservative, which is something the frickin' Lions should have done. That pissed me off even more because everyone in America was rooting for the Lions. Like, and my piece of bar trivia still holds up now that there are only 4 teams that have never been to a Super Bowl. The Lions kept that number at 4 based on that stupid stuff that Dan Campbell was pulling during that game. We get all of these flashes on the screen if you're watching these broadcasts about how analytics says go for it. And it's never said don't go for it. It says go for it every single time. And like, when you're up against this kind of team and you're protecting a lead, just try to kick a 45-yard field goal. Just try to continue scoring, because once you get up like that, you just need to keep the lead in I don't know. Not, like, that's maintaining the lead in the second half should have been the priority, frankly, for the Lions. But and it would be one thing if they had Lamar Jackson at quarterback who could scramble on 4th and 2, but Jared Goff is like the least mobile starting quarterback in the NFL. I feel sick for Lions fans. I really think that Dan Campbell mismanaged that game. I know it's the philosophy of what he does, but what's also good philosophy and tactics is being unpredictable to your opponent. And when Dan Campbell's going to go for it on every 4th down, it gives the defense an opportunity to take some chances and be like, okay, well, we just bait this guy into doing something over aggressive, and then we're right back like with the possession, able to get the lead. And You just can't give a team like the 49ers with that much talent an opening, and I thought the Lions really mismanaged that game.
Well, I mean,
Oh, and can I just say quickly, the other thing I was mad about was the Ravens. What were they doing? They were passing the whole game. Like, run the damn ball. Run the ball.
I was going to get to that when we got to that, the Ravens Chiefs game as well. But I think the moral of both games clearly is that, one, these two teams that we are ultimately in the Super Bowl
They deserve it.
they're juggernauts, and the reason why they're juggernauts is that they can sort of win in ways that we may not anticipate them winning. Like, it's not all the time that Patrick Mahomes, on this particular iteration of the Chiefs dating back like 5 years, is winning like a 17-10 rock fight, buttressed by the excellent performance of their defense, as opposed to, what we usually are expecting, the offensive fireworks from Mahomes, or with in the case of the 49ers being down 17 points at the half and tearing through the second half with, whatever it might have been, 24 unanswered points, basically. But I think the moral of that, beyond them being able to win in a number of different ways, which is why I think the Super Bowl matchup, despite being a retread, will be so exciting, is that when you are facing a team like this, any mistakes you make, both on the field and schematically, as in both in terms of penalties or strategic blunders, are critical.
Yeah.
You kind of like, for a team like the Ravens or Lions, who have actually in these iterations, honestly for the Lions, who have basically never been here before in the Super Bowl era, you cannot make mistakes that could be taken back. And what I mean by that is like mistakes that are tactical or personal in nature in terms of penalties, I guess. Like, and what I also mean by that is, for example, like Kyle Van Noy getting the personal foul against Kelsey.
Yep,
It's like what Travis Kelsey does best beyond what he does on the field is he riles people up and gets under their skin. Well, you can't, by no circumstance can you be in that moment and get a 15-yard penalty against the Chiefs, regardless of how inconsistent they were through the regular season. They are built for moments like this. They have been forged in moments like this. The Ravens have not been.
The Ravens could not intimidate them. That was the thing.
That's the problem. Even on their home turf, they couldn't intimidate
people
them.
Underrate how chippy and
angry
absolutely the Chiefs play, and it's been this
on
way
both sides of the ball. Honestly,
on both sides. Even
few...
Mahomes. I mean, like, even the wide receivers are getting in people's faces. The tight end, with his superstar girlfriend, getting in the face of these big ass MFers. I mean, that touchdown catch that Kelsey had with Kyle Hamilton playing
draped over him,
playing wonderfully. I mean, Hamilton's a star.
You could not cover that route better than Hamilton did, and it didn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Kelsey was one of the few people who can make Kyle Hamilton look normal sized.
Yes.
But so all that is to say, just in terms of my big picture takeaway, being that just avoidable mistakes really felled both teams. I see what you're saying in the sense of, on one hand, there's an ability to understand Campbell's strategizing in the sense of being like, you stick to your ethos that you've stuck to the entire season. You kind of can account for the fact that your defense isn't really stopping anybody, and the fact that this kicker that they had, Michael Badgley, had been inconsistent from the yardage.
Some of New Jersey's very
a Northern New Jersey legend, had been I don't believe started the season with the Lions and had been inconsistent from the field goal range that they were at
the lower end of the start.
With all that being said, I don't think with what I'm saying I'm being an advocate for one to either pole. What I think was a problem with how Dan Campbell managed the game is when he decided to be aggressive and when he didn't. I think not going for it right as the coming up against the halfway point and instead kicking the field goal didn't give them more insurance to actually be able to be in a tie game, potentially 27-27. And then as a result of that, going for it and failing, as opposed to just kicking the field goal to potentially tie it and bring the game into overtime, regardless of what could happen in overtime, that's the chance to extend the game where you are at that point, which is your defense has allowed the team to score 20 unanswered points. you might as well give yourself a shot to keep the season alive, not the game alive. At that point, you're playing for you're playing existentially, not just strategically. You kick the instead of going for it in that circumstance where the Niners had the exact right defensive game plan, which is get Goff out of structure, and he can't do anything.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry though. Like, okay, I agree with you. He kicked a field goal earlier in the game, right? I mean, like
which was the one against the run right up against the half. Yes, he did. He did do it.
And then later decided not to, and it just felt like we got to go for the knockout. We got to go for the knockout. We got to go for the knockout. And the
49ers took advantage of the aggression.
They did, and I think like Dan Campbell was biting kneecaps and Kyle Shanahan was playing chess or whatever. And you can't allow a team that talented any opening. And if you're just like forcing them, and the Lions were moving the ball. If you just keep maintaining your lead to a degree, that frustrates the opposing offense as well. And even the defense that's facing you, it's like, God, like, okay, like we kept them to a field goal, but man, we're still down 14, we're still down 17. And I just felt like it was a, I don't know. It was not smart football. And I don't think he managed the game the right way.
And also just in terms of an X's and O's thing as well, Jay in the YouTube chat said this as well, which I think is a great point. The Lions also stopped running the ball when the Niners couldn't stop them. If anything, if you're going to go for it on 4th and short, what was working more was the run game. The offensive line was bruising those guys up front and kind of mesmerizing them a little bit more with how the game was called from a rushing perspective than passing. And I feel less concerned that, there's no fear of Jared Goff having to fare out of structure if you're pounding the rock with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, which was working prior to the some of those decisions. So I think it was both in-game decision making, but also actual schematic shortcomings as well. I think, and to your point, also and to your point, I do see what you're saying though, in the sense of, even if going for it is the more aggressive play call, there is a way where it almost does become mundane, right? It can become so that the assumption is that you're going for it on 4th every time, which changes the construction for what the Niners are doing, which makes it more predictable.
You're telegraphing what you're doing. Right. It's like you have
There's no variety. There's no nuance in the game, in the play calling. Yeah.
You have one tool in your arsenal, which is you're a baseball bat. Like right? And that
you're a sharp, blunt instrument.
You're a blunt instrument. You're a hammer, whatever you want to call it. And the 49ers know that you're going to use the baseball bat to bash them in the head.
Yeah.
And you can bash them in the head, and they did. This was like a good game plan. Like they bashed them in the head in the beginning. This is a bad analogy for concussion, a sport with a ton of concussions, but you understand what I'm saying. Like they beat
purely
them up in the beginning,
bashing.
Right? What'd you say?
It's a purely metaphorical bashing.
Exactly. They beat them up in the first half, and then the 49ers are bloody. They're stumbling. This is when they start to take swings, and you can't be using the same stationary bat swinging, right? You've got to start to bob and weave and change your strategy a little bit, because it's not about going for the knockout blow in the same way that it was the strategy in the first half. Going up and saying like, we're going to punch you in the teeth to start the game was the exact right strategy. It threw the 49ers off. They're surprised by the physicality of the offensive line for the Lions, which is like going into the next year might be the best line in the league. Penei Sewell is a top 5 left tackle in the league. Like they threw them off their axis and then begin to play smart. And they didn't do that. And then it's because of how egregious the Dan Campbell stuff was, and I like him a lot. I think he will. I hope he assesses this and like doesn't go into next year with the same strategy, because then everyone's going to know this as well.
Like you can add more nuance. What
was Todd Monken doing?
Well, yeah, let's go. Yeah, if we can turn to the other game too, in terms of like, let's talk about real strategic shortcomings in terms of how to approach a defense. I was astonished given what we had seen. I was astonished given what we had seen throughout the entirety of the regular season. The sheer lack of rushing possession, rushing snaps that the Ravens were taking, and also when they were going to straight drop back, which they were doing a lot, they had Justice Hill in like really integral pass protection positioning, which if you can look at some of those snaps looking back, he was lost. He was either actively not picking up a block entirely, or he had no idea where he was supposed to be helping. So it just made no sense to me that they were not only not attempting to establish and cement the run game, which had been working all season and had been extremely effective.
The Chiefs were 22nd in the league in defensive success rate against the run.
And against, as you said, and to that point, against a defense that, while having not that many weaknesses, one of them is stopping the run.
Yep.
To then utilize your position group in that way of having Justice Hill out there having to take on blocks that he was not capable of taking on. Lamar was uncomfortable the entire game. Lamar was holding on to the ball a second or two longer than he usually does because he was heated up on almost every play. And when he wasn't heated up, Spagnuolo switched it up to make it so that he was looking as if he was going to be heated up, and then every route was covered.
It was bizarre too, because the week before, the only thing that was working for a while for the damn Bills was the run game with James Cook. In the end, they stuffed it. And that's why Spags is a genius, is like he basically took it away at the end. But it was Josh Allen and James Cook.
Exactly.
Josh Allen and James Cook. They were actually able to make plays with that strategy. Why the Ravens did not do that is astounding to me. It's beyond me, especially with corners that good. I mean, definitely a top 5, I think, starting like corner room in the entire NFL, the Chiefs. Like, they were able to make plays. They shut down Odell. Zay Flowers had a big mistake, fumbling into the end zone, and that was that. And so it just was a very, very weird game plan, and it felt a little like they were trying to show off and say, we're the Chiefs now. We can pass the ball all over the field, and I just thought it was not complimentary football. I think Todd Monken should get a lot of criticism. And I don't know. I was not super impressed by Todd Monken all year. I just thought the talent won the day more. And he did make some adjustments, but it didn't seem groundbreaking to me. It was better than what they had before.
I mean, the bar was on the floor with Greg Roman. I just think it was slightly more, dynamic than.
Slightly more dynamic, but I mean, until the end of the season, the Ravens really got steam towards the end of the year, but it wasn't like incredible the entire year. So I don't know. I was much more disappointed in the decisions that the losing teams made than I was like thrilled and impressed. I guess I should say by the 49ers, because the 49ers have had some really close calls, both with the Packers and now with the Lions. It makes me think the Chiefs are going to be my pick for the Super Bowl, but I will say that I am incredibly impressed with Patrick Mahomes, as always. He's I
mean, there is something to be said about these situations that you find yourself in when you're this good, and even when you're this good in the team that has been this good for the better part of a decade, even when it seems as if they are faltering, somehow, some way, when the situation arises that it's win or go home, they just start playing the best football of the entire season.
They're special. They're magic.
It's astonishing.
It's astonishing. It's Mahomes. It's Kelsey. It's Andy Reid. That whole organization and the confidence they have. They both have incredible confidence and also like belief in the way that the freaking Patriots did. That we're the underdogs. They can convince themselves of that. I mean, it's almost to be a great football team like this, you have to basically be a cult.
To delude yourself into thinking that like you were the ones without the agency. Whereas you're literally the reigning Super Bowl champions. But as you said, that's the way you sort of start over each year.
Mahomes has been to 4 Super Bowls in 6 years as a starter. He has been to the AFC Championship game every time he's been a starter. He's lost to Burrow
and Brady.
That's it. And Brady beat him twice. Brady beat him in his final Super Bowl going to go to the Super Bowl in the AFC Championship with the Patriots, and then beat him in the Super Bowl. And that's because Mahomes basically was running on one foot because he had a horrible toe injury that he had to have surgery on after the end of the season. So we're witnessing an incredible player, and For me, this is the kind of stuff that sports fans should live for. Like, I don't get the Chiefs hate. I don't understand it. I don't understand when people hate dominance for, like, as I said, I hated Brady because I find him unlikable and, like, hate a lot of things about him. I don't have those same misgivings about Mahomes. So, I love Mahomes, and I actually really like Kelsey. I guess let's talk about this insanity. Like, okay, I'll admit it. The Taylor Swift stuff's a little, it's annoying. It's grating on me, and
Emma's voting for Trump now.
Yeah, and now I think women should stay in the kitchen. But like the point is just, what grates me about it is that it's portrayed as if this is some like organic situation. The NFL is showing her all the time because she has a massive, massive fan base that she has very carefully cultivated through her talent and through, like, honestly, her primary talent is being a capitalist. She is the best capitalist singer in the history of like commodifying themselves.
She's extremely business savvy.
I
Absolutely.
mean, she is. I think that is her greatest accomplishment, in my view. And that's not something I value really as somebody who's more socialistically minded or Demsoc, whatever you want to call it. So I have a little bit of a jaundiced eye towards it. I'll say that. And, again, I also get frustrated because I know that if she were a black person or any other race or wasn't a white girl, like, this level of fandom and the highlighting of her would not have the same tone. And so I just find that to be grating. With all of that said, it's sweet, their relationship. Like, I don't really begrudge that. I think that they seem to be into each other, and also it's mutually beneficial for him. He has a podcast. He clearly wants to go into some sort of media after he's done playing. He's an incredible player. She's very, very influential, and the NFL is thrilled about this because it has a whole new cohort of girls in particular who are paying attention to the sport and tuning in and moving ratings by tuning into Chiefs games. So that's why they're showing her. It's capitalism. Everyone's benefiting. Everyone's making money of the parties that are being shown, and that's that. Or
sometimes the right answer is the simplest one.
Or you're a right-wing psycho,
but
that thinks this has something to do with Joe Biden, which is astounding to me. Okay, we were talking about this before the show. I can't think of a pop star who's less political. Like, seriously.
And also, whenever she's been political, quote unquote, it's rather anodyne.
It was Marsha Blackburn, vote for this conservative Democratic senator in Tennessee.
For Phil, former Tennessee governor Phil Bredesen, who was governor in like the early 2000s. Like,
that was the first time she ever weighed in on politics.
Right, and Marsha Blackburn won. The PSYOP didn't work then. Marsha Blackburn's still in the Senate.
Was that 2016?
2018.
28.
Yeah.
So even after Trump.
Correct. Yeah. And
okay,
then,
so did she even weigh in on the Trump election?
I don't remember. But I don't think so, because I think the registering to vote thing was 2020. Yes, I'm pretty sure.
Every pop star that I can think of that is like female pop star was anti-Trump vocally. Beyonce, Lady Gaga, Katy Perry. I don't know. Like,
yeah, it wasn't a particularly radical stance to like just say like
either
to be against Donald Trump or to endorse Hillary Clinton, either one.
But it says something about Taylor Swift that she didn't do so, and that's because she is, as I said, she's a capitalist and she did not want to alienate anybody. But when Trump was so awful, then she made a determination. Okay, time to maybe say what I always thought. Okay, and I don't really care what's in her heart. I care what she does, and it's good that she's trying to get these girls to register to vote, young women, and that she doesn't support Marsha Blackburn or seemingly Trump. But like, that's what's so weird. Like, can you explain this to me, Bradley? Is it because right-wingers are so stupid that they can't consume media or like football without thinking there's some sort of deep state agenda? Because she's so prominently featured, that's got to be a conspiracy, I guess, as opposed to just capitalism.
Well, I think that's primarily it, in my view, which is that it would almost be borderline. It would be more conspiratorial to me if right-wingers actually concluded that this was mostly about each side of this, i.e., the larger financial project of Taylor Swift as uniting with the larger financial project of the NFL to make as much money as humanly possible, which is actually what's going on. Like, if Vivek Ramaswamy came out and was like, this is a mutually beneficial partnership to make as much money as possible with the Super Bowl, i.e. the most gluttonous capitalist event imaginable, where every major company pays hand over fist to get their products advertised on this platform, and will do that doubly so now because the biggest pop star, arguably the most famous person on the planet, is going to be prominently featured in it. I'd be like, Vivek might be on to something. That's interesting that he's actually pointing that out. No, instead they're going with this bullshit that it's actually a partisan political stunt, which has absolutely no bearing in reality because as you said, any entreaty that Taylor Swift has ever made politically has been extremely value neutral.
And we know she doesn't give a crap about climate change. I mean, she's breaking records for the amount of like greenhouse gas emissions that she's
which they are now
plane.
But which they are now pointing out as if that is something that adds to the conspiracy or adds to what they are subscribing to.
Sincere about being like a Marxist or whatever they think. It's crazy. It is.
That's what I'm saying, though.
Weirdest political conspiracies I've seen in a while.
That's what is also confusing to me, is that if anything, you would think it was a notch in her belt the other way.
Yes.
That she doesn't care, that she's not, taking the train to Tokyo for her concert. Right. Like, it's somehow she is both a liberal industry plant designed to embed herself in the most, the most prominent cultural sports event of the year to then ultimately swing the 2024 election, while also having her most prominent political, outreach effort be go register to vote. If you go register to vote, I have news for people. If you went to register to vote for 2020 and they hadn't registered, so a Taylor Swift fan who is not registered to vote could have registered to vote and then voted for Donald Trump.
What? Well, that's not what.
When you register to vote,
that's what they're saying is going to happen at the Super Bowl. Is that she'll finally reveal her Joe Biden endorsement?
Yeah, it's like QAnon. It's like the storm. It's like Donald Trump
is
coming. It's that Donald Trump's going to lift his mask and be like, by the way, I'm actually, I'm the white hat who's going to ascend to the presidency and pardon all the January 6th defendants and depose Biden or whatever. It's the other way. It's the reverse white hat. Trump is, Taylor's going to remove her mask and it's going to be Joe Biden. I find it interesting.
They do look alike.
Yeah, I find it interesting how logically incoherent it is, because is she a hypocrite? Is she a hyper leftist? Is she a secret conservative?
Yeah.
Apparently she's all of them, and apparently all of that leads to the conclusion that she's going to endorse Joe Biden after the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, which is rigged, which I imagine is news for the San Francisco 49ers, that they're going to lose the Super Bowl in 2 weeks.
Well, I mean, have they read the script yet? Because the Democrats...
Clearly they haven't.
And the globalists, and you know what we mean by that.
Yeah, so come on.
They're the ones writing it. Yeah. It's, what it really is? One, they're conspiracy QAnon pilled. Two, they hate women. So like they get to work backwards from that. They're resentful of her in an incel perspective. I think they're also resentful of her for being a white girl that isn't aligned with them anymore. Or they don't have that plausible deniability that she was aligned with them anymore. Because I remember articles from years ago about white supremacists saying that it was she was their favorite celebrity because she presented white purity or something like that. And maybe that's what's driving it, because now she's contradicted that publicly, basically, by being vaguely in support of conservative of the Democratic Party over the Republican Party, I guess. But it's just weird. Oh, and you know what else it is? It's because of Kelsey, because of Mr. Pfizer.
Right. It's also clear that that's the other aspect of it too, which is, as you're saying, if that's the case, that even white nationalists who are like, she's a good emblem because she's like, a prim, lily white singer. She's that means that this is not without any reflection on her, for what the right uses her as, she's an avatar or a cipher of whatever they want her to be.
Yep.
So it also, that's why it kind of conveys this amorphous meaninglessness because she's everything.
Exactly.
She's a globalist. She's a hypocrite for using a plane. She's a hyper leftist. She's going to swing the election. She's not that important because she's a Hollywood elite. Like somehow it's all the same. It's all that fits into one category.
Yeah, somehow.
It's all of those things.
Well, she's all things to all people because she's a wealthy Hollywood celebrity.
Right.
And so that's why these freaks still think like Oprah and Tom Hanks are in the basement with Hillary Clinton drinking the blood of children. Because
Right.
They literally are so evangelical coded that they don't have the ability to discern between a political elite and like a Hollywood elite. Right. And they think that there's all this crossover because you know what it is in the end? You know what connects the two of them? The Jews.
I was just gonna say that's probably the Venn diagram. Here.
That's what when they say
well, guess what?
Guess what?
The Soros Foundation, the Carlyle Group purchased Taylor Swift's music, which, by the way, she was not happy about.
Oh, right, she was very vocal against that.
Like she literally, the reason she created the new albums of all of her songs is to get out from under the Soros Group and the Carlyle Group owning her music.
Well, maybe that's a way to protest a little bit too much, okay?
Yeah, maybe hear me out. The Soros Foundation, the Carlyle Group said, "Hey, we did not buy your music, but because we have that ownership over you, you're gonna have to give us something in return, which is form a relationship with the Pfizer spokesperson Travis Kelce and swing the election to Biden, so we can continue our project of opening the borders and establishing progressive district attorneys all across the country to allow unmitigated retail theft all over, which while our beautiful police officers and law enforcement officials look the other way."
Yeah, you know what?
Sorry. We're gonna get demonetized for that because I just told too much truth.
You did. I mean, this is, you know who else controls big tech too? Same folks.
Yeah. So listen,
same folks.
They don't want me. They don't want me saying this.
It's so much easier to think of the world as like a place in which some people who you don't see and you don't know who they are really, unless you do a little digging on some 4chan forum, that they're controlling every aspect of your life and that it's all connected, instead of doing the real work of reading academia or history or the news and seeing that actually it's an incredibly complex world with billions and billions of people in it, and there's no one orchestrating the entirety of the events that you're seeing in front of your screen.
And what's always really rich to me is, Sam says this all the time. Sam Cedar says this all the time that Alex Jones and conspiracy theorists like him sometimes are the biggest gift to organizations and entities like the CIA and the FBI, because when you actually speculate about some of the very real things that these people with these organizations and governmental entities were involved in, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, like the 1953 coup in Iran, and actually speculate about how involved a lot of these people, a lot of these organizations and governmental entities were in actual world events, you'd be like, you're a conspiracy theorist. Right. Yeah, because if you set the terms of the debate so far, where Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are swinging the election, anything that's actually really fucking happening seems too far-fetched to actually get involved in.
Well said. That's exactly right. All right, well, I'm glad we addressed that very important issue. Okay, so some quick news items before we head out of here. Dan Quinn got hired by the Commanders, which is hilarious. They clearly wanted Ben Johnson.
Did you say Dan Quinn or Dan Campbell?
I said Dan Quinn.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard Campbell for a second. I was like, Dan Campbell.
I mean, someone can fact check me, but Dan Quinn. After having like a horrific performance against the Green Bay Packers in the playoffs, and I'm just shocked by this. Like, Dan Quinn.
I'm annoyed.
I'm not, because they're in my division.
Yeah, no, you actually should be like rejoicing at this hire.
I'm sure the Cowboys fans are laughing too. The guy is he's not that creative of a defensive coordinator, and he doesn't even really seem to be an effective leader of men. Kyle Shanahan carried that Falcons team to the Super Bowl. Carried them, and notoriously they were up 28-3.
Shanahan's job.
Shanahan scored the points, the defensive head coach
Quinn's job.
fell apart, and the damn Patriots won yet another ring because of that. And then when Shanahan went to the 49ers, the team kind of started to fall off a cliff. And that is, I think, kind of indicative of the kind of coach that Dan Quinn is. So I'm just surprised by that. And then this is what Micah Parsons had to say. He's so vocal, and even though he's a Cowboy, I just can't help but really like his honesty and enjoy hearing from him, because he's just someone who speaks off the cuff, speaks his mind, and has thoughtful things to say. I'm enjoying this like NBA-ification of NFL personalities, like whether it be the Kelsey podcast or what Micah Parsons is doing here, just getting control, speaking their own truth and having their own podcast. I think it's pretty cool. But I just, Dan Quinn getting hired, this podcast coming out 24 hours before that I think just raises some eyebrows, I think, about what is going on over there in Dallas.
At the end of the day, we were just outperformed, out-schemed. They had an answer for everything. People saying, well, why ain't you go to linebacker? Guess what? The packages are in for me to go to linebacker. I can only play what it's called. I'm not putting out personnel. I've even told multiple players, coaches, that I'm very fine playing linebacker in playoffs. If that's what y'all want me to do, I just want to win. I do see a Super Bowl in my future. I want to be a Super Bowl champion. I challenge anyone to actually go look at the game film and say, did Micah play his heart out? To go out like that at home was completely embarrassing and unacceptable. It took me a while to even be able to show my face in the public.
It's interesting when he says scheme and outcoached. We were outplayed and outcoached. And then criticizes where he was positioned on the field.
He says, I don't make the packages. They are locked in prior to the game. He's very, very not so subtly saying, I'm not responsible for where I'm placed on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Look, what the Cowboys linebackers are shitty, right? So part of why they need Micah Parsons to rush the passer is because the Cowboys don't have good linebackers. But that's part of the problem with the entirety of this last Cowboys season. I always was doubting them. I mean, and then I got burned a few times because they'd beat up on all these teams at home in the regular season. But I never, ever believed in them as being on the talent level in the NFC. Of the Eagles, who did collapse, of course, themselves, but that is not a talent problem. That's a coaching problem 100%. And the firing of both the offensive and defensive coordinators, I think, made that clear. But for the Cowboys, they never had the talent on defense that the Eagles or the 49ers have. Like, you said it all year that Mozzie Smith was bad. They couldn't stop the run. They didn't have a guy.
When Jonathan Hankins was out, Mozzie Smith replaced him, and it just was not the same run defense unit.
And they don't have a safety that like scares you in any way. When they lost Diggs for the season, like, I know that they were still getting interceptions over there, but it's not like their corners were locking guys down. Their linebacking core isn't that great either. And then in that playoff game against the Packers, they couldn't get a pass rush going.
Also the through line between Trayvon Diggs' season from the year before he got injured, as well as Deron Bland's season where he had the most pick sixes in a season, is that the aggressive nature of those two cornerbacks made it so that a lot of what was going on was sort of route jumping in anticipation of turnovers, which, like, when that works, leads to high variance outcomes that are translate to points. But when that doesn't work, sometimes it leads to a lot of blown coverages.
Yeah,
which is that's hence the Green Bay Packers dropping 30 plus points on them.
Right. So my point is just like, I think that a player like Parsons carried a guy like Dan Quinn throughout the season, and even Parsons wasn't able to do everything he could and disappeared in some games because there weren't enough guys to complement him with what he can provide for the team. There was too much pressure on Micah Parsons. And then from a scheme perspective, I had my doubts about Dan Quinn when he joined the Cowboys. I have serious doubts about him as a head coach. And it seems clear to me that the Commanders didn't want him. They wanted Ben Johnson, and Ben Johnson decided for whatever reason that he wanted to return to the Lions. Maybe he just didn't trust Adam Peters, their new general manager. Maybe he had a bad vibe about ownership. Maybe he didn't get the contract that he wanted, which is what Schefter reported, which seems very, very favorable to ownership, by the way, because like it's not like coaches' salaries count against the salary cap. If the Commanders really, really wanted Ben Johnson and he wasn't rejecting them, as I think probably was the case, it's either one or two things. Ben Johnson didn't want to play for the Commanders because it was made clear that he was their first choice, or Josh Harris and the ownership group there didn't want to pay him. None of those things are good for the beginning of the tenure of this ownership group, because either they're too cheap to get the top talent at the coaching position in coaching hires, or they're not a desirable place to go. And so I can't see a way to spin this hire as anything other than a negative. And Micah Parsons' comments about coaching really bolster that for me. So
Aaron Schatz, who is the formerly of Football Outsiders, and now at FTN Fantasy. Where did I put? I had the stat. He said Dan Quinn has fielded a top 5 DVOA defense in all 5 of the seasons where he was a defensive coordinator. In 6 years as head coach in Atlanta, Dan Quinn never fielded a defense with the DVOA higher than 14th. Coordinator and head coach are different skill sets, so take that for what you will.
Yes, and I don't really think he's a great coordinator or a great coach, and that's the. I'm enjoying some of this Cowboys implosion stuff, I gotta say. So
a little Schadenfreude for you, Emma.
Yeah, a little bit. Other few items. I mean, I think Vrabel and Belichick are gonna do the
Sean Payton
take
the year off,
which is tough for Belichick because he's not getting any younger. And when he joins a team, he's going to want to like basically be the GM too, and
which we've seen play out before.
And I don't know if teams want to be like right. And I don't know if teams, even with that, even if they're willing to put that aside, and he says, "Oh, I've adjusted my philosophy," like he's also not going to be around that long. So people want their general manager to be around for a while to build a team.
Yeah, he's 72 years old now.
Yeah, so he'll be
so
73
is Pete Carroll.
Next year. Right. Well, Pete Carroll, I think, is probably just going to end up
just being in the Seahawks organization.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's happy about it, but that was kind of what they did to Bruce Arians.
Right, with the Buccaneers.
In the end, they're paying them basically to be quiet and not go anywhere else. And Pete Carroll, I think, has genuine affection for the Seahawks organization. Vrabel, I'm surprised by, but he will be, I think, much hotter than Belichick next cycle.
He will, and I don't think. Yeah, I certainly don't think he will be off a team for long. Yeah. Ben Johnson, I think beyond, I mean, whatever might have happened with the Commanders' job, it seemed as if there was a pretty steep asking price, which I understand. I mean, he really is the engine behind turning this Lions team around. I mean, you can of course argue that Dan Campbell was the cultural engine, but schematically it was Ben Johnson.
Yeah.
And on the offensive side, and then Mike McDonald with the former, now former Ravens defensive coordinator will be coaching the Seahawks, which I think is going to be a good hire.
Really good hire. I mean, he's a 1-year coordinator. Or wait, no, this is his second year. This is his second year actually.
Yes,
I'm wrong.
I think.
I'm sorry about that.
Second year.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess that's better than I anticipated.
But of course, we'll see obviously how the executive function of these things go. Obviously, that's the biggest, as you know, I was saying from what Aaron Schatz tweeted. That's obviously, it is a different role being a coordinator relative to being a head coach. But I think with how McDonald really creatively and emphatically improved this Ravens defense, and also very much elevated some of these players who had not been nearly as effective in other stints in their NFL career. I think I would be very excited for a Seahawks defense that I think has struggled to kind of like fully matriculate to see how he affects that side of the ball. Hopefully, obviously, he can do a similar thing, ideally, as to what D'Amico Ryans did with Bobby Slowick, which is sort of seed the offense to a creative mind and kind of delegate that way, as opposed to sort of wanting to focus primarily on the defense while sort of conservatizing the offense.
And you know what I like too is that that division has two brilliant like offensive minds in Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan. And so it's like, how are we going to ever move forward. I mean, they were bedeviled this year by the 49ers, and the Rams swept them when people thought the Rams were going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL last year.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, we need to figure out something where our defense, even though Pete Carroll was a defensive head coach, I don't know, maybe he just needed some new ideas, some fresh perspective. And we'll go back to our roots as Legion of Boom 2.0, get a guy with a bit newer of a perspective and build through the defense. And then we're back to Russell Wilson football, where he doesn't have to make a ton of decisions.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know if Gino's a more pro style quarterback who's like making reads at the line of scrimmage, which Russell never would do, but and still didn't do in Denver. But so we'll see how that pans out and if they go somewhere different at quarterback. But really weird coaching cycle. You know, the two greatest pedigree coaches out there in Vrabel and in Belichick just not getting the sniff. And when the Falcons went with Raheem Morris, I was like, this was the only place I could have seen Belichick go.
Because it seemed because he had multiple interviews in Atlanta, which is why I was surprised it ultimately wasn't Belichick. But if anything, honestly, I think for the Falcons' purposes, I like the Raheem Morris hire a lot.
I mean, he's another cerebral, brilliant defensive mind,
who was also coordinated on offense too.
Yeah,
and been a head coach. So like he has the experience in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, and I like Raheem Morris again because I am partial to New Jersey people. He's from New Jersey. That's helpful. So for my rooting for him,
the best and the brightest,
the thing that matters the most. Yeah, I mean, he was the head coach of the Bucs, right? It didn't work out
when he was much younger too, with like less experience.
Yes.
Also, and I feel like he's gotten so much high quality experience and work out of working with Sean McVay on both sides of the ball.
But what's so like, I mean, he was I guess it was he was the interim head coach, I forgot, after Dan Quinn was fired.
Yeah
So then they went with Arthur Smith, and then they're going back to their guy who they had in-house for a while.
Right.
And I mean,
so at least he has also, as you're saying, he has experience with the team too, which is, I think, probably a nice thing for the Falcons front office and ownership to like have kind of a more known quantity, as opposed to obviously, taking Belichick, who's been the fixture of one team for 2 decades, and bringing that very specific leadership structure and leadership perspective in-house after all that time.
Right.
I'd probably rather have Raheem Morris and see where he'll go personnel-wise in terms of offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, what have you, than presumably maybe have Bill Belichick parachute in from Atlanta with, Matt Patricia, Joe Judge, and his son. It's
just, I wonder how it went down, because Terry Fontenot was hired as the GM of the Falcons in January 2021, and that was like the season where they passed Morris over
for Arthur Smith.
Yeah. So I'm curious how those negotiations, if Terry Fontenot was always
a Morris supporter
guy,
or detractor,
right? Yeah, and if Arthur Smith was an Arthur Blank guy, and I mean, I'm curious about the politics of that for sure. But
yeah, interesting. I agree with you. Kind of a discordant cycle. Yeah. I sort of thought that like the conventional wisdom once, I sort of thought going in that once we sort of saw some of the interview rumors or scuttlebutt, that it was like Harbaugh to the Chargers, Belichick to the Falcons, Johnson to the Commanders, and McDonald to the Seahawks. After sort of the other ones had kind of settled, like, Callahan to the Titans, Pierce to the Raiders, etc.
Right.
Mayo solidifying his, heir status in New England.
Yes.
But then, Johnson goes back to Detroit, and Belichick and Vrabel both miss out on another nod.
Oh, good for the NFL's optics and progress in the NFL, because that's 3 black head coaches that were hired, and I think the 7 vacancies that were available. I mean, so there were the Titans, the Raiders, the Seahawks, the Falcons, the Chargers, the what am I forgetting now?
You say Titans, Patriots, Falcons, Raiders, Chargers.
Where's it? 6? Damn. All right.
Panthers.
Panthers. Oh God, who did they even freaking hire?
Dave Canales.
Oh yeah, right.
Bucs offensive coordinator.
So that's Gerard Mayo. That's for black head coaches. Gerard Mayo, Raheem Morris,
Antonio Pierce.
Yeah. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah,
That's pretty good.
I'll take it.
Yeah, we'll take it, NFL. So what now? I mean, like, there's...
I'd probably take Dan
still-
Quinn not getting another shot. But,
Yes, yeah.
Beggars can't be choosers, I guess.
Right, exactly. All right, folks. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up this show.
Yeah, no football this weekend.
No football this weekend.
The first OT since September of not having a game to anticipate.
We'll begin to talk about some other sports starting
now that
on
we've-
Monday because Bradley is going to the Knicks game tonight. Oh, maybe I'm sorry for giving your assassination coordinates.
Do not.
Yeah, sorry.
When you dox, you get suspended.
Don't tell Sam. I'll get commissary privileges docked. But the Knicks are so freaking fun. I'm back into the NBA. 14-2, best January record since 1994, and the Knicks are still winning when they don't have two
with some
of
injuries
their
on the
starters
roster,
playing.
with some attrition.
You know
It's
what I
good
meant
see
to
that.
tell you at the beginning of the show is the DiVincenzo contract looks so freaking incredible right now. 4 years, $50 million, and he's been this incredible shooting, three-point shooter,
Which is exactly what they needed, what they did
Yes.
not have, which is reliable shooting at at many positions. And
Exactly.
This Villanova contingency on the Knicks of Josh Hart, Jalen Brunson, and Dante DiVincenzo has been very enjoyable both on and off the court because it seems like they're actually friends. So it's fun to watch them succeed together.
And I'm such a fan of like a defensive player like OG Anunoby who also doesn't go on social media.
Love OG.
Serious, studious.
Have you ever seen the video where he seems to legitimately piss off Serge Ibaka because he told Serge that Serge got his style from him?
No. Was he kidding?
He didn't he was, I think, trolling Serge, but Serge got legitimately upset.
Oh, really?
He was like, he's like, you think I started wearing hats because of you, OG? He's like, no, I know that you did. Like, I was wearing hats.
Oh, he was trolling
He was
him.
like, I was wearing hats before you. He was like, I'm older than you. I've been in the league longer than you.
So Serge Ibaka doesn't have a sense of humor, is what I'm hearing.
He got so pissed. That's why I also love OG, and that he's just like this deadpan droll type of guy who also just has arms down to his ankles and can defend any position.
Oh yeah. I mean, and he's a true 3-and-D player, folks. That's
We love
what
it.
we
We
call
love to see it.
We love to see it. The Knicks are so fun. When
Yeah,
the Knicks
so
are fun, I'm back into the NBA, so I've been watching more NBA, and
It's Knicks Pacers tonight, so I speaking of former Raptors, I hopefully will see OG Anunoby. I know he was day to day because he had a bit of a sore shoulder thing. I think he's playing, and then ideally I'll see Tyrese Halliburton, who I love, and
Holy
Pascal
smokes.
Siakam, newly minted
talk about
Pacer.
arms down to his down to his.
All the Raptors. That's the Raptor way. You just have to have
I meant
general
Tyrese
Grievous.
Halliburton.
And Halliburton too is also for a point guard so lengthy,
All right,
which I love.
Well, I am. Yeah, I know. That's
Hoping for a good game.
It'll be a great game. It'll great. I mean, both good teams. All right, folks. The NBA is fun again. It's kind of more wide open. We like it. We love to see it, folks. Anything else?
No,
All right.
that's it.
Bye.
Bye bye. I didn't. Okay. Okay. Bye.